coming home. I've been gone.
Out of all of the founding fathers of black commerce in Columbus, Mississippi, Robert Gleed has to be the most interesting. The brother escaped from slavery in Virginia at the age of 17. Instead of fleeing north, he decided to move further south into the heart of slavery because his sweetheart had been sold into Mississippi. In 1848, Robert Gleed showed up hungry, tired, and destitute on the streets of Columbus. Being a slave and having no master, he drew attention from the whites that lived in the area. After finding out that Gleed had no master and that he was a runaway, under the Mississippi law for fugitive slaves, he was sold to a master in Columbus, Mississippi, where he resided until freed after the Civil War.
I'm coming home. I've been gone too long, yeah. I knew when I left, yeah. I was fooling myself.
Our story starts on the bank of the Tombigbee River. Like most societies at that time, having access to a river meant the difference between life and death for small communities that didn't have a lot of roads. Goods could be shipped from this area, cotton, corn, and other crops, downriver to Mobile, Alabama, where they could be loaded on the larger ships and then moved abroad. In turn, slaves and other goods were brought up the Tombigbee River to be sold at local markets. In fact, if your family has been in this area for more than 5 generations, chances are you have an enslaved ancestor that came in on the Tombigbee.
Coming home. I've been gone too long, yeah.
Not all black people that came to Mississippi started their lives here enslaved. As early as 1790, according to the courthouse in Aberdeen, Mississippi, the first black man to come to this area was named William Cooper. He started a trading post along this area that became the first black-owned business here. He traded the horses and furs with the Native Americans. He was also a contractor who built barns and homes for new settlers here. So in fact, he could be the father of black business in Columbus, Mississippi. In 1846, the first bridge built across the Tombigbee River was built by a black man named Horace King. Horace King was born of mixed race in South Carolina. He was considered to be one of the best bridge makers in the South. In 1846, he built a wooden structure that stretched from Lowndes County over to Clay County. The bridge lasted 90 years before it was replaced by an iron structure. Around the turn of the century in the 1900s, black fishermen would come out in small boats and collect huge, vast amounts of catfish and bring them back into the city to be sold. Anybody who lived in Columbus knows that place now was called Catfish Alley because there were open markets where people would cook fried catfish sandwiches and the aroma could be smelt all over the city of Columbus. One of the major sites in the 1900s where African Americans congregated to fish and share camaraderie is now known as the Riverwalk. This is Catfish Alley, the mecca of black dollars in Columbus, Mississippi in the early 1900s. At one point in time, there would have been black businesses all down this street, but as you can see now, all of that is gone.
I've been gone too long, yeah. I knew when I left, yeah.
This is Jones Restaurant, the last spot left from the old days that have gone by. It also has a liquor store next door. Even though this was an important area for black commerce, it wasn't the only one. There was another lost Black Wall Street here in Columbus that was hidden for several different reasons. One might have been people just forgot, others could have been bigotry, or they could be just covering up a past. Well, at least they did put a monument up. We're on 5th Street and 2nd Ave in Columbus, Mississippi. This used to be known as Glee's Corner, and even now some older people still call it Glee's Corner. It was named after Robert Glee Sr., who was a runaway slave who came here and started one of the first businesses here in Columbus owned by blacks. Right here, we're in a grocery store owned by a friend of his named Jack Rab, also a slave who bought his freedom before the Civil War, opened up a store right next to Robert Glee. Now imagine that, 2 black-owned grocery stores side by side, in unison, selling the same exact thing to the people in the community, and there's no problem. Right here would have been a barber shop. There would have been a saloon here. On down on the other side were also businesses that were owned by Glee and Rab. All of this took place around 1875 during Reconstruction after the Civil War. But they end up losing it all when a terrible incident happened one night on the eve of the sheriff elections for Lowndes County. Right here, where Glee's store would have been, people were having a parade. And they were having a parade because they knew the next day Glee would be voted in as sheriff. The vote was tremendously black. At that time, there were about 338,000 black people that were voting Republican, and about a little bit over 1,000 whites that were voting Democrat. So that night, in order to intimidate the black voters, white residents came up here, carrying torches and guns and pitchforks of the sort, and they decided to intimidate the black voters by opening fire right here in this area. In fact, one of the people that got killed died right here in front of Glee's grocery store. 4 people were killed and 3 were shot. But there's no monument here. There's no sign here. Let's go a little further. This is the old Gilmer Hotel. It was built before the Civil War. All of these bricks were handmade by slaves. The mud was dug up from along the Tombigbee River and framed and built brick by brick into what you see now. So much of Columbus has been built by black people that we know nothing about. Now, after Robert Glee was ran out of town in 1875, all of his assets have been liquidated. They sold 295 acres of his land for $115 on a debt that somebody claimed that he owed them. His house was sold for $11. In this day and time, that probably would have equaled up to about $200. After the building was saved, this became the first black bank in Columbus, Mississippi, penny savers. W.I. Mitchell, the man who also became the first principal of Academy School, became the first president here. Also, he had been an ex-slave too. So that just goes to show what men could do in the worst of circumstances. So why we can't do it today? White citizens in the town were determined to torch every black business in the area. Robert Glee knew that his time was up. Had it not been for a white man who befriended him and hid him in a well, he probably would have been lynched on the spot. After escaping to Texas, he stayed there until his death in 1916 when he was brought back to Columbus to be laid to rest. We're here in Sandsfield Cemetery, one of the oldest African-American cemeteries in the city of Columbus. On July 17, 1854, this land was bought from a plantation owner for the specific purpose of being a graveyard for black people. An ordinance was passed that said that any black person who died in Columbus had to be buried here. There are countless slaves that have been buried here. Some of them were born in Africa, and some of them were first-generation Americans, born right here. 3 of our most prominent businessmen in this community are buried here. Jack Rab, W.I. Mitchell, and Robert Glee. Right now I'm standing in the graveyard of Robert Glee and his family. There's so much history here in Columbus that we look over every day and don't give it a second thought. This your boy Kwame Sankofa, and this has been the Drunkin Disciple.